Rachel stood in the store and chose a gift wrapping. Today was her parents' anniversary, 20 years together, and on this occasion she decided to make them happy with a surprise. Finally, among the huge assortment, Rachel found what she needed and went home. At home, she immediately went to her room. From the closet she took out a box with a gift, paper, and got down to business. After wrapping the gift, the girl saw that it was already 5:30, which meant that in an hour and a half guests would arrive. Rachel went to help her mother with dinner. At 6 p.m., as planned, the guests arrived, and everyone sat down at the table. One by one, glasses were raised and toasts were made. It was Rachel's turn. After hugging her parents and telling them how much she loved them and was proud of them, she handed over a gift. Opening the gift, the parents saw that it was a pair of engraved watches. The girl had been saving money for this gift for a whole year. It was appreciated at face value and the parents liked it madly. They said that now they would always wear this watch. Rachel was happy that she was able to please them. The party went well, the guests laughed, enjoyed delicious food and gave gifts. Some presented household items, others gifts for the soul. Close friends of her parents pulled out an envelope. Rachel was insanely curious as to how they would react. After all, she had come up with the gift idea. That year, for example, the girl had suggested a skydiving trip. The parents were delighted. Mom took the envelope and spun it a little. Opening it, the woman happily said that they were flying to vacation in Bali. It was a trip for two with her husband. Rachel was happy for them, although in the back of her mind she was a little sad that she won't going with them. It had been about a week. The girl's parents were getting ready to go on vacation. The girl was looking forward to being home alone for the first time. Rachel had a docile character, so it was not in her plans to have a party immediately after their departure. Being alone for her meant becoming an adult, because soon after school the girl planned to enter the institute and move out. It was time to fly on vacation. Rachel's parents left her some money for the time of their absence, took the necessary things, and happily rushed to the airport. The girl was left home alone. Despite the fact that her parents were away, everything was as usual. Rachel did her homework, walked the dog, and cooked dinner. To keep her from being bored, the girl constantly had the TV on in the background. In fact, it calmed Rachel a little, because, to tell the truth, she was a coward. The girl had always been afraid to be alone, especially at night. In her years she still left the nightlight on every night. Tonight she was even more uncomfortable. The only thing that comforted her was that her dog was close by. At night Rachel couldn't sleep for a long time. Until 3 o'clock she tossed and turned in bed. She constantly thought that there was someone in the apartment. She heard rustles, but every time the dog ran out, and Rachel realized that the noise was made by her. With the lights on, she did manage to fall asleep, but not for long. After a while, the girl woke up from barking and saw that the window was open. Something was lying on the floor, and a dog was barking nearby. Rachel walked over and saw that it was a broken picture frame with a picture of her parents lying there. Apparently, it had been on the windowsill and a strong gust of wind had pushed it to the floor. The girl picked up the frame and put it back in its place. For some reason it made her feel uncomfortable. Rachel began to worry about her parents. She decided to dial them, since according to the time, they should have arrived by now. After a couple beeps, she heard her mother's voice. She said they were fine and were on their way to the hotel. After talking to her parents and calming down, Rachel was finally able to get a good night's sleep. In the morning, the girl went to school. She didn't feel very good because she didn't get enough sleep. After school, Rachel invited her friend Kylie to visit her so that she would not be bored and lonely at home alone. The girls went to the supermarket and bought groceries. When they got home, they started cooking. Rachel's mood lifted. While the girl made sure that their dish did not burn in the pan, Kylie decided to turn on music videos on the TV. There was a news report on the screen. The report was from Bali. A friend called the girl into the living room with the words, "Look, Bali is being shown here. Maybe you'll see your parents." But then Kylie was not laughing. The correspondent told about the fact that the bus with tourists got into an accident. The collision caused the engine to catch fire, resulting in an explosion. There are dead and injured. The girls sat in shock. Rachel came in from the kitchen. She literally had no face on her. Kylie told her friend, "It doesn't mean that her parents were on that bus." The girl immediately picked up her phone and started dialing her father or mother. The phones were unavailable. Rachel was literally shaking with worry. She didn't know what to do. The unknown was frightening. Every 5 minutes the girl tried to call her parents. Her friend advised her not to get worked up. After all, they could go for a walk and just forget the phone in the room. But Rachel could not get through to her parents. The girl's eyes were red from tears. She did not understand how to contact her parents. In the media there was information only about some of the dead and injured. Moreover, the number of victims was unknown. But late one night, Rachel's phone rang. The voice was a stranger. It immediately alerted the girl. On the other end of the line, she was told that her parents were dead. Rachel's eyes went dark. Her consciousness became confused. Kylie quickly reacted and brought her friend ammonia. She quickly regained consciousness. The girl began to cry hysterically and scream. It was hard for her to realize what was happening. About 2 weeks passed. The girl's relatives helped organize the transportation of the bodies to the United States and the funeral. In the church, standing by the open coffin, Rachel looked at the watch she had given them, and also remembered the fact that it was she who had offered to give her parents this ill-fated tour. She berated herself for it. It seemed that life was over. As it later became clear, because the girl was a minor, she could not live alone. So she was placed in the care of the closest relative. It was Aunt Sally. She lived outside the city in a small settlement. The woman had 3 children. She was also a farmer. She had a farm consisting of chickens, goats, pigs, and sheep. The girl arrived at Aunt Sally's house with her belongings and her dog. Rachel had not been here for about 10 years. Immediately she saw a big old house in front of her. Next to it was a barn where the woman kept cattle. For some reason everything about the place seemed gloomy. Rachel did not really like this area, because, in fact, she came to some hole. Aunt Sally greeted the girl cordially. She showed the house and her room on the 2nd floor. Everything was rather humble. The floor creaked everywhere and the house was obviously in need of repair. The woman introduced Rachel to her children. Her oldest daughter, Ashley, and youngest son, Brian, were friendly, unlike her middle daughter, Sharon. She was silent and looked sullenly away. The girl's gaze was so heavy and sizzling. Rachel seemed to think that the girl had mental problems, and so she tried to avoid her. And Sharon was not eager to communicate with her newfound relative. They met only in the evening for dinner. The girl had been living with her new family for about a week. Aunt Sally had given her some chores to do and said she would soon teach her how to handle the cattle, namely cleaning the pens and feeding them. Rachel didn't mind the work and helped in any way she could. She traveled with the other children to town for school. With Ashley, the oldest of the girls, the girl even became a bit of a friend. Of course, Rachel did not settle in completely. Every night she remembered her parents and cried into her pillow. One day the girl decided to walk with her dog on the street near the house. She saw that all the houses that were on that street were for sale and empty. At dinner, she asked why there were so many empty houses. Those sitting at the table immediately stopped eating and were awkwardly silent. Aunt Sally told her that it just happened. She shouldn't walk alone on the street because there were wild foxes. Rachel decided that it was because of the wild animals that houses were sold, and besides, this place was a godforsaken place. There was no store or schools, for all that it was necessary to go to the city. But later Ashley came into the girl's room and asked if she wanted to know the truth about why people were abandoning their homes. Rachel nodded her head in the affirmative. Ashley told her that about a year ago, cattle had started to go missing in their village. But then someone had seen worms get under the animal's skin and start eating out the insides, leaving only the skin. No one had ever seen such things before. So people started to leave, as only farmers live here, and their farms started to suffer losses. Now they're the only ones left in the village at the moment. Maybe the thing that killed the animals has gone somewhere, but the people who left don't want or are afraid to come back here. The story made Rachel feel sick. She was afraid of any rustle, and from scary stories, she had panic. The girl began to worry about her dog. She decided that she would be more careful to make sure that it did not go out alone. Anxious thoughts literally did not leave her head. During the night, Rachel woke up to rustling and creaking in the hallway. When she looked around, she noticed that her dog was not there. She panicked, as her dog always slept next to her and never left her side. Rachel threw on a sweater and went out into the hallway in pajamas. The girl was looking for the dog. Going downstairs, she shone a flashlight. Through the window she saw someone walking in the barn. Rachel was scared for the dog and, gathering all the will in a fist, made a decision to go there. Through the window she saw someone come out of the barn. Going inside, the girl saw that there were 2 stained dead goats lying on the floor. Gnawed holes in their bodies were visible. The girl immediately threw up. She didn't even have time to move anywhere. Turning around, she saw Sharon, lights on in the back of the house. Aunt Sally came outside, followed by Ashley. Noticing the corpses of the animals, the woman began to groan. Now something had gotten to her household. She took the children inside, saying there was nothing to see. As it turned out, Rachel's dog was in the house, and noticing that her mistress was missing, started barking, thus waking everyone up. The girl calmed down when she saw that her dog was fine. That night Rachel had a hard time getting to sleep. The girl decided to latch the door shut so the dog wouldn't run out into the hallway. After making sure the dog was close by, she fell asleep. In the morning, Aunt Sally said there was no point in them staying here any longer. The thing had ravaged the whole settlement and now it had gotten to them. The woman said that she would not wait for her entire household to be killed. She's already put the house up for sale. Perhaps they could use the money to buy something for themselves. Farming was the only thing Aunt Sally really knew how to do. Another week passed. No one called about buying the house. Rachel still locked herself in her room the same way before going to bed. This night the girl woke up to a dog barking. Looking up at the ceiling, she saw a light. Rachel looked out the window. There was a figure walking along the yard from the house to the barn, and after a while someone came out of the barn and walked with an unnatural gait, hiding behind a corner. The girl could not see from afar who it was, but it was strange. The next morning after breakfast, Aunt Sally told everyone that she had found 3 decapitated rams again today. The woman said that since there was no response to the house selling, she would sell the cattle before it was completely slaughtered. Sharon was against it. This was the first time Rachel had heard Sharon say anything at all in her entire stay here. She had never heard her speak more than a couple of sentences. Sharon had asked her mother to stay here. After all, this was their home. Aunt Sally explained to her daughter that it could be dangerous here. But Sharon didn't listen to her. She started screaming and hysterical. The woman gave her daughter a sedative and took her to her room. Rachel was surprised by the girl's behavior. Later, she asked Ashley why Sharon was acting this way. She used to be shy about asking anything about her because she thought she might offend with her questions. Ashley said that Sharon was a normal, outgoing girl until 6 months ago when she went missing. Sharon went into the woods with some friends. When they didn't return home, the children's parents contacted the police. A search was launched. The girl herself came out to the settlement 4 days later. But the other children, they were found a month later, murdered. The corpses were so mutilated that the coffins were closed. Sharon was lucky because she miraculously survived. Rachel was scared witless by the story again, but now she understood why Sharon was acting this way. Her psyche had simply broken down after the incident. The girl suddenly remembered seeing someone at night coming out of the barn. She went up to Aunt Sally and told her about everything that had happened at night in private. The woman said she was wrong not to tell her at once. The only solution now is to set a trap. They just don't have the money for an alarm system. But traps can help. And that if the girl, in the future, notices something like this, let her call her right away, no matter what time it is. Finally, Aunt Sally got a call from someone who said he was willing to buy a part of the cattle from her for a decent sum of money. The woman took some of the animals to the buyer herself. He promised to add money for delivery. It was a long drive. It took about a day to get there and back. The children were left home alone. Aunt Sally took her youngest son with her and told the others to be careful. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, Rachel sat at the table and did her homework. She could not sleep. The girl was afraid that someone would come again that night, even though they had set traps, but it didn't help stop this creature to others in the township. The only way out was to leave, which is what the others who lived here actually did. She kept thinking about who it was, who could kill animals and who could kill Sharon's friends. She was interrupted by a scream from downstairs. The girl was startled, but went down. There was no one downstairs, but the door was unlocked. Rachel walked toward the barn, lighting the way with a flashlight. Halfway there she realized she'd better turn it off, for the light might scare anything or anyone away. The door to the barn creaked loudly, and she saw blood in front of her, blood on the traps she and Aunt Sally had set without telling anyone. There were pieces of someone's flesh on the floor, and the corpse of a goat. The other animals were unharmed, at least it seemed so to her at first glance. There was more screaming coming from the side of the house, and a dog started barking. Running home, Rachel saw no one but the dog. The screams were coming from the basement. The girl slowly went downstairs. The girl saw Ashley standing there pointing a shotgun in the direction of the bound Sharon. Rachel asked them what was going on here. Ashley replied that she saw, through the window, an unidentifiable silhouette heading toward the barn. Without a second thought, she went there. But what she saw there shocked her. Sharon was sitting on the floor of the barn, rolling her eyes. Only the whites of her eyes were visible, and out of her mouth came several strange tentacles. At the end of the tentacles were small mouths with a single sharp fang. It pierced the skin of the helpless animal, pumping the flesh and blood of the goat into Sharon, leaving only bone and skin. Rachel couldn't believe it. But Ashley said it in all seriousness, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to tell it. Ashley had to grab Sharon or what was left of her. She tried to tie her up, and while she was doing that they got caught several times in the traps that were set there. The tentacles that came out of Sharon tried to grab Ashley. It seemed like Sharon was in a trance. One tentacle bit the girl's neck, but then she managed to get out and grab an axe. Ashley managed to cut off one of the tentacles, and then they went down Sharon's throat and her eyes closed. Ashley tied her up while she was unconscious and took her down to the basement. When Sharon woke up, she started screaming, and Rachel came running. Sharon was sitting on a chair, tied up, and her own sister was pointing a gun at her. Sharon started crying and saying that it was them. They want to eat, it's not her fault, it's them. Rachel, recovering a little from the shock, asked the girl how it happened. Sharon answered that it was in the woods, where she saw something scary behind the trees that looked like a monster. The girl lost consciousness and woke up with bites. Some worms started to come out of the wounds. She was afraid to tell anyone about it, because they climbed into her body and there was no trace left. Then she began to feel hungry all the time, and the tentacles killed her friends. It's not her, it's the tentacles. They want to eat. Sharon said this, choking back tears. Rachel shifted her gaze to Ashley. Something similar to what the girls were talking about had come out around the girl's neck. The girl backed away. Sharon started making unintelligible noises, wheezing and rolling her eyes. The girl tried to say something, but out of her mouth came these tentacles. They were reaching for Ashley. The girl pulled the trigger and fired 1, 2, 3 shots. The tentacles continued to grow. Rachel suggested running. They ran outside with all their legs. From behind they heard barking. Rachel couldn't leave her dog there. The girl ran back despite Ashley's yelling for her to stop. When Rachel entered the house, she saw her dog wrapped in tentacles. She wanted to grab something to cut them off, but there was nothing nearby. Suddenly she heard a gunshot behind her. The bullet hit Sharon in the head. The tentacles dropped dead to the floor, freeing the dog. But it was too late. Rachel fell to her knees, unable to hold back her tears any longer. She sobbed. Behind her she heard a wheeze, and a plea for help. Turning around she saw that it wasn't Ashley standing behind her, only what was left of her. The same tentacles were sticking out of her body, only bigger. Much bigger. The girl's flesh was tearing. The tentacles grew and headed for Rachel. The girl tried to run, but the creature quickly caught up with her and grabbed her. A little farther away Rachel saw a rifle. She managed to reach it with her foot and pulled it closer to her, taking it in her hands and pulling the trigger, aiming for where Ashley's head was. With each pull the creature's grip grew weaker. After a succession of shots, the creature fell. The very tentacles went into the gut of the bodies as if they didn't exist. The girl went back to her room and sat until morning. In the morning Aunt Sally arrived. She saw the corpses of her children. She accused Rachel of the murder. The woman did not react to any of her stories. She was firmly convinced that due to the death of her parents, the girl had gone crazy. The court recognized the sanity of the defendant, and Rachel was sent to the colony for 2 murders with special severity, which she committed. The corpses had no organs, which means that the girl with special sophistication somehow removed them. How exactly? The investigation cannot explain. To this day in prison for Rachel come letters with curses from Aunt Sally.